Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Educator Colin's Snap channel. How you doing? So, initially, I was going to go over 3 or 4 of the most common one energy cards and just compare them. But after doing it, after starting it, didn't really think it made too much sense because they have different purposes. So instead, we're going with a classic top list where we're going to be going over our top 12. 12 because you can put that in a deck. One energy cards. We will be talking about them from bottom up, in my opinion. So it's pretty speculative, but we should be covering all the premium and most used one energy cards. Initially, I was also thinking just review all of them. But then I looked at the list and I'm like, do I want to review Hawkeye? Not really. Sorry, Hawkeye. But yeah, that's the format we have today. I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get started. So, number 12, we have Elektra. Elektra is going to be my number 12 one energy card. Now, the reason why I think this card is pretty good is that it just destroys some of the more common and prevalent one drops in the game. This card isn't that common just because people don't like running it or so. I actually don't know why it's not common. I guess maybe due to armor. I guess armor would be the reason why it's not as common because anytime people are running Sunspot or Ant-Man or something like that, they always usually have an armor. So since you're a lot of the good players will be protecting their one drops with armor, people just don't want to run it. However, you're not really gonna see armor in every game, and this card is a 1 mana card that can win you the game completely win you the game for 1 mana. And just having that option, especially if you don't have full collections and things like that, can be just a great way of surprising people. This card people don't expect past a certain point, so you can really just mess them up. It messes up Quinjet as well, where people really index into that Quinjet so you can take that down. So there's actually a lot of power to this card. The issue, I guess, why it's number 12 is just because armor is run and it doesn't do anything into armor, so you do have to be careful about that. But it's still a really good card. Still has its uses and definitely deserves a spot in the top 12. Next up, we have Nightcrawler. So I like Nightcrawler just because it lets you reach into places that you don't really have access to Spectrum and stuff. And it also buffs up Angela, which is a pretty common staple in the early pools. And just having that flexibility of moving means that your opponents might not be paying attention and might not know that, oh, even though that spot is filled, you can just move your Nightcrawler and play another card there. I've definitely lost some games because I wasn't really paying attention, didn't realize they had a Nightcrawler, and then I was like, okay, I win this lane for sure. And then, oh, no, I don't. No, no, I don't. They moved the Nightcrawler, play their card there instead, and what I thought was a winning lane is now a lane I struggle in. So definitely is a good card, has the uses, and pretty safe investment. Another thing you can do is buff this card up with some of the locations and then move it to another one. I've seen that happen a couple of times as well. Next up on the list, we have Agent 13. So this card is usually used in Dino decks or card draw, card generation decks, but it's just a good card anyways. The ability to get a random card in your hand can really mess with your opponent. They're not going to know what to play around. So there's definitely some scenarios where, oh, I get something from Agent 13 and it's the one card I needed, and it really changes how I approach the rest of the game. So definitely think it has an upside. A lot of times it's just going to give you a card which for Dino decks is exactly what you want. And it's just a solid card. You don't really care if this card dies or anything. It's not really that important to your deck list. It just fills a niche and can sometimes give you the option you need to destroy and win the game. Next up, we have the Hood. So the Hood's usually used in destroy decks. You want to get rid of the first copy, and then you want to take advantage of the demon, the 1 mana 6. So it's a nice piece, especially when you don't really care too much about how your early game goes. You're just destroying things. You get to play this 1 mana 6 power, which is really good, and it just lets you have those big pop off turns. People like comboing it on turn 6 with something like Arrow or maybe a Taskmaster, some other big play. And it's just a nice tool. You can copy it in Moongrow if you want. And it's just a nice card. If you don't get rid of the Hood, then it's essentially 4 power because it's -2 plus 6, which is 4. But even the Hood copy can do some damage. Some people like moving it to your opponent's side. Some people like playing it in bar with no name and sneaking a win that way. So there's tools to use this for. But overall, it's not super common in many decks because it's 2 location spots, which are hard sometimes to really afford. And it's just a card that you have to spend 2 mana in. So all in all, it has some drawbacks, but overall it's a great card. Definitely in the top 12 list easily. Next up, we've got Squirrel Girl. So this card beats Galactus. No, I'm kidding. this card destroys everyone. But this card's just a nice, flexible tool for any rush decks, any decks that want to have access to weird locations, and just any Patriot list, any buff list. There's just a lot of decks that this card goes in. This is maybe one of the best one drops early on in the game, especially when you're seeing a lot of Khazar Blue Marvel Zoo decks. It just works really well and always seems to find a place in some deck list. So very, very strong. The scrolls are fun. The scrolls are just a good tool. Let me showcase the scrolls. They're very cute, right? Like that's a huge plus. And you just know that, oh, I've got scrolls in my deck, you know. It's definitely definitely a solid card in how you want to play the game. Yeah. You do have to be careful sometimes. People do run Killmonger and you can't armor this. So if you're relying on the Squirrel Girl scrolls, you might just get punished at the last turn. But overall, if you are running a deck that can utilize 1-drops very well, this is the best one of the best ones to have. Next up, we've got Titania. So this is a 1 mana 5. It's really, really powerful, really good stats. This is one of the biggest power swings you can do, except for something like Demon, for 1 mana intrinsically. And it's just a really nice last turn play. Now I say last turn play even though it's a 1-drop because a lot of the times when you want to be using this like effectively, you don't have you just do this and play it. You do a 5 cost play or a 2 and a 3 or whatever. You use your 5 mana, then you play Titania at the end. And this allows you to not have to deal with that downside where if any card is played here, switch sides. So usually if you play this early, now it's a guessing game, right? People can make this jump to the other side, then you have to decide, do I want to jump back, etc., etc. Another cool thing you can do that this is not often utilized is if you see a location with 3 spots, you can play Titania and something, and force the Titania to clog up their fourth spot. And then at the end of the game, you can play something back in that same location. Let Titania jump back to your side, and it's very easy to win the location that way. So that's something you can do. It's not very common because it's pretty hard to set up, but it is something that I've seen before. And anytime someone can do it against me, I'm like, ooh, you got me. So this is a really strong cost play, and it usually works with Arrow Titania or Taskmaster Titania as a finisher. But you can play it early if you don't have a game plan for it. It's a little bit risky, and that's where the weakness comes in. Next up, we have Nova. So Nova is kind of my it's kind of my one drop that I play if I don't run one drops. I guess is how I would say that. So usually some people run Killmongers. If you're running Killmonger, Nova is a very easy addition to your deck because I'm going to be killing one drops anyway. So I'll just get some extra power in the one spot. And since I'm not running one drops myself, sometimes I won't have anything to play on one. Nova's like, okay, here you go, play this on one. So definitely like this card. It's very common in destroy decks. Just buffs up all your cards. And it's just a nice tool. This used to be so toxic. This used to be the meta completely, this Nova card, but they kept nerfing it and nerfing it. And now I think it's a pretty reasonable spot. So now I think it's fairly solid. It's still a good card. It's just not meta breaking, meta defining as it used to be. So definitely think it's really strong. You buff up everything when it dies, and as long as you have activators, this is really, really powerful. Next up, now we're getting to the juicy cards. This one is number 5. We have Ant-Man. So Ant-Man, definitely think this card just works. It just works. It's when you have 3 other cards here plus 4 power, so it's a 1 mana 4 that's super easy to activate. If they're playing Ant-Man, okay, they're probably contesting this lane. Maybe I don't want to contest an Ant-Man lane. 4 power for 1 is really good. So, and the ongoing is actually quite strong. Opens up Spectrum, opens up some synergies with Onslaught, whatever. And it's just a really, really nice tool to contest a lane. You can play this turn 5 or turn 6 to really close out a game. Some very common things is like Iron Man, Ant-Man. You'll get that huge buff. So definitely a really strong card. You see this a lot early. This is a really punishable card. 2 Elektras we talked about earlier, but not everyone's running Elektra, but you'll see a lot of Ant-Mans. Definitely think it's a really strong card. Works and does its job really well. Next up, we have Zero. So this is a number 0. It's number 4. So Zero just kind of solves a lot of your early game issues. I actually think this card shouldn't be 3 energy. 3 power in my opinion. But I mean, all the top cards I think could use an adjustment. Honestly, so these top 4 I think could all use an adjustment, and I wouldn't complain. But Zero, definitely think it's really, really good. It just solves a lot of the early game issues. You can target Lizard, you can target Titania, you can target Ebony Maw, you can target Atuma, you can target Typhoid Mary, you can target Red Skull. There's so many targets that you remove the ability and the card gets better. And it's just a very strong tempo tool, early game, mid game, whatever. It just does its job really, really well. It's very common right now in Shuri decks, but even without Shuri, you can just play Zero and just have a really, really powerful early game engine. So definitely think this card's really good, really strong, really fits. If you want that aggressive one drop early playstyle, this is what can do it for you. And then next up, we have Quinjet. So Quinjet, my issue with this card is I don't think you should be able to make things cost 0. It's just too good. Like the stone's all 0. It's so strong, And things with Moon Girl, Maria Hill and stuff like that, just costing 0 is just like so broken. But overall, I think it's a really good card. You usually see this in Dino decks with Sentinel spam, things like that. It's really solid one drop there. So definitely think if you are going to be having card generation, you just need this card. It just does so much for you. So definitely think this is one of the top one drops in the game. Just so strong, so ubiquitous. If you're going to be having any card generation at all, and there's so much card generation in the game from the locations as well that even if you don't have any synergy, well, you should have synergy. You should have synergy. But even if it's not in your hand yet, sometimes your locations can give you that extra synergy you need anyway. So definitely a really strong card. Really think it works well in the current metagame. And at number 2, we've got Iceman. So Iceman wins games straight up. It does. It actually just wins games because it messes with people's curves, and people's curves are so important. Where they need to play this on 4, they need to play this on 5, they need to play this on 6. I've actually had the most like problems with this when people don't play this on 1 and plays like on turn 3 or something, where I've already played my 1 drops and my 2 drops, and the only targets in my hand are my 4 and my 5, and it just messes with that. And like, okay, well now I can't play my 4 on 4. Like that's actually really bad for me. So definitely think this is a really really strong card. Wins games like, and a lot of the one drops I would say that were the top 4, top 5, they just win games, and this is the best one for winning a game. It's sneaky because you won't know if you've won a game from Iceman, but it does definitely win games by itself. So it's a really good card, really strong, and definitely if you don't know what one drop to play, this is the one probably I would recommend because it just wins you a game, wins you games, and even if it gets destroyed, it's not gonna lose you a game from getting destroyed, but it wins your game from getting played. Where Quinjet might lose you a game, and the number 1 might also lose you the game. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows at this point what the number one drop is. Very obvious. It's Sunspot. Of course, it's Sunspot. We all knew this going in. This card is so strong, and it just synergizes with a lot. It fixes your curve, and there's not really too much of a downside of playing this on 1 unless you fully um, index into this card and just have that be your whole game plan. And there are some locations where Sunspot just wins you the game by itself. Cloning Vats, Sinister London, cards, locations that let you play multiple copies of it. It's just like, okay, I get every time I end my turn, instead of getting +3 or whatever, I'm getting +6 or +8 or something. Even like Throne Room, right? Like, this could be the winner of Throne Room. Just like, okay. But Elektra really does eat this, but no one's really playing Elektra. You really don't have to worry about Killmonger. So if you have an armor, this really, or even a Cosmo, this, well, Cosmo does lose to Killmonger, but armor definitely protects this completely. So if you have Sunspot armor, you don't have to worry about any of that downside. So this is just a really, really powerful tool. Works in a lot of scenarios. Fixes up the She-Hulk, sets up the She-Hulk completely to just get that. Also sets up Infinite, even though Infinite isn't played as commonly. You're usually going to do She-Hulk if you are waiting a turn, but you can do Infinite as well if you want to do that. And there are decks where you play both, so there's definitely some benefit to that. But it's just a really strong card, fixes your curve, even if you don't have that perfect curve. Sunspot's like, hey, we don't have a 3-drop. Let me eat. Let me gain my power. So yeah, very, very strong one drop. I think it's currently the best, or like the top one in the game. It's kind of hard to say what the best is because they have different uses, right? Like I think Agent 13 in the right decks is way better than a Sunspot. Same thing with like Squirrel Girl, Zero in the right decks. These cards are better. So that's why I had difficulty with my initial video idea where I was going to be comparing like the top 4 or something and say, oh, this one is the best. Like that's not. I was like, that's not true. That's not right. They have different purposes where one deck you might want an Iceman. Iceman into Scorpion, bam, that's great. Another deck, you might want a Quinjet. Another deck, you might want a Zero. So it's not that, oh, this Sunspot is the best and use it in everything. It's that this, you see a lot and it performs very well in the decks that you do run this in. So this is going to be my top 12. Let me know what you like about this, if you like this format, if you want me to do it on other energy costs, things like that. I wanted a deck. I mean, I didn't have a video today, so I wanted to do one that I could get done relatively quickly. And overall, hope you guys liked it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care of yourselves.